Hey guys, what's up? It's Snake here, and I got some zombie storyline for you on Shangri, so let's just jump right into it. First, we're going to be talking about the Vril Society, and if you remember, they're made up of three groups: the Lords of the Stone, the Thal Society, and the original Vril group, which was made up of witches. And one of these witches was a medium by the name of Maria Orsich. And she was receiving transmissions. She was receiving telepathic visions from aliens from Alpha Centauri, showing her how to build spacecrafts or flying saucers, which later became known as the Vril series or VR series, as in VR1, VR2, etc., etc. And what it was they were using these transmissions to build prototypes in order to create a spacecraft that would be able to fly them to Aldebaran, which is the star also known as the Bullseye Star for its location in the Taurus constellation. It's the Bull's Eye. And this, of course, is where the alien race, which came down to Earth and settled in Samaria, this is where the alien race was from, and this is where the Vril Society, of course, is trying to build their spaceship to get back to. So they're using these transmissions in order to create prototypes, the VR series or the Vril series of flying saucers. Now, some conspiracy theorists believe that instead of her receiving transmissions from aliens, they actually discovered alien technology and was using it to reverse engineer their flying saucers. And that's what was taking them so long, was they were trying to figure out the technology to discover how to use it to become, to make it an actual spacecraft. Now, if we go even further down the rabbit hole, we find other conspiracy theorists who believe that not only was it alien technology, but it wasn't even extraterrestrial alien technology. It was interterrestrial alien technology. Now this goes into the hollow earth theory. They're actually saying that the spaceships existed inside our Earth. They were created by a race that lives on the inside of our Earth, and they can use these holes in our Earth at both the North and South Pole to fly the spaceships in and out. And they used that technology from inside of our Earth to create the Vril series of spacecrafts. Now, for the hollow earth theory, and to figure out exactly how these aliens that live inside of our Earth, or these beings that live inside of our Earth, got the spaceships in the first place, we're actually going to have to take a trip back in time to 2193 BC. Now, 2193 BC, biblically speaking, was when Noah's flood occurred. But if we're talking about hollow earth and crazy conspiracy theories and all these crazy myths and legends and whatnot, we're going to find out about Atlantis. And it is said that that is the same year that Atlantis actually sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Now, the reason why I bring up Atlantis is because if you recall, I was speaking of how the Vrilia, which was the subterranean society that I was talking about in the Call of the Dead storyline episode. These guys are actually related to the Atlanteans somehow. And it's also believed that the Atlanteans are related to the Aryan race, which again the Vrilia have been connected to. And they're also thought to be related to the Thal, or Hyperboreans. Now the Thal, like I was saying before, the Thal Society, which was one of the groups that came together to make the Vril Society, these guys are named after an actual place called Thal. And Thal, which was inhabited by the Hyperboreans, was considered to be far north, way up above the Arctic Circle. And Hyperboreans, all that means is that these are guys that live above the Boreas. And of course the Boreas means north wind. That's where we get the name Aurora Borealis from, because it exists up above where the north wind comes from, or where it was originally believed to come from by the Nordic people, excuse me. So we got these Atlanteans, or these Thalians, or whatever you want to call them. They live on this island, and they've existed for thousands and thousands of years. They're from back way before pre-recorded history. And we got these guys, and they either have some, depending on the myth you're going by, They either have some form of super advanced technology or magic-based technology that we don't have anything to compare to, because they were just so far advanced from us. Now, a great war came about, and depending on again which myth you go by, it was either a civil war of the Atlanteans or it was the Atlanteans and the Sumerians fighting. But somehow they decided to turn to thermonuclear war, or at least a magic-based equivalent to thermonuclear war, which then caused the devastation of most of the world, and it wiped all of them from the earth. That's why, of course, we can't find any skeletons or anything like that. There's no real hard fact proving the existence of Atlantis. But of course, people who believe in these conspiracy theories point out Australia and parts of China and even parts of America and places like that, all these barren deserts, these barren wastelands that, according to them, used to be teeming with life until the thermonuclear war that occurred from Atlantis, that destroyed most of most of their population. Excuse me. Now, like I said, it was most of their population. Not everybody died. There was a large group of people that lived on our planet at the time that decided to go inside of the Earth in order to survive. And so these guys went into the Earth and created, or at least inhabited, Agartha, which is this world that exists inside of the Earth. And the way it exists is like this. Let's say we have a shell, like a sphere. If I have a ball, like a wiffle ball, almost. But instead of it having a whole bunch of holes, it only really has two, one at the top and the bottom of the ball. And on the inside, at the very center, is a sun, and then on the inside lining of the ball is where everybody in Agartha lives. Just on the exact opposite side of where we live. Now, like I said before, there's other gates besides just the two main holes at the top and bottom. And of course, these other gates that are scattered throughout the world, the most famous, of course, is Shambhala, or Shangri, which is also considered to be the capital city of Agartha. So all throughout recorded history, we actually have many accounts of people accidentally stumbling upon Agartha in some fashion. There's Nordic myths of people sailing their ships way up north, literally falling into the earth. There's even an account from a gentleman by the name of Admiral Byrd in 1947 who wrote in his journal about how he was flying his airplane. And of course, like many of these stories all begin, his instruments started spinning crazily and he didn't know what was up or what was down. And the inhabitants of Agartha was using their advanced technology to guide his airplane into the hole at the Arctic Circle. And once there, of course, they went up and greeted him and explained how they were peaceful people and they saw all the evils and whatnot in the outside world. And he explained to them that, he had to go back and preach peace and let them know what was going on inside the earth, because eventually they were going to come out and lay down the law. They were going to put their foot down and be like, okay, enough's enough. We're going to kill off all the bad people and set things straight. Sort of like a wiping clean, wiping the slate clean and starting fresh. And of course, I've talked about the prediction from the vril, from the book Vril, The Power of the Coming Race. The narrator talks about how the Vrilia would eventually outgrow their caverns and come out onto land and destroy everybody on Earth. And many similar stories of Agartha have a prediction somewhere between the year 2029 and the year 2424. Where eventually they would come out and there would be some sort of apocalypse where they would purge the earth of evils. Another interesting connection between the Vrilia and Agartha is that Agartha plays a very big role in Tibetan Buddhism. Now, in Tibetan Buddhism, these guys saw Agartha as sort of an enlightened place, almost like a heaven or a nirvana kind of thing. And in their mantras or their chants, they would use metaphysical tools. They would use a thing called a vajra, which is Vajra, and it's a tool also known as like a thunderbolt of the gods. It's a tool that they would use to chant and sort of channel their energy. And instead of trying to describe it to you, all you have to do is look at the golden rod from Call of the Dead, because that's exactly what it is. The golden rod is also known as a vril generator or a vajra, and I likened it to the vril staff from the book Vril, the Power of the Coming Race, how the Vrilya would use their vril staffs, which could take any shape or size depending on the holder, and they would use it to sort of channel their telekinetic energy, much in the same way that the Vajra was used by the Tibetan Buddhists. Now, if that didn't make your mind explode, this will. Let's talk about the swastika. Okay, so the swastika, obviously everybody knows its connections to the Nazis and to Hitler, but he chose it because it predates history. I mean, the swastika emblem was found all around the world. We're talking Neolithic times, prehistory, pre-recorded history, before people even knew how to write, kind of thing. There was emblems or images of the swastika all over the world, seeming to appear all roughly around the same time. I mean, we're talking the Native Americans, Mesoamericans, Asians, Egyptians, all over the place, all around, roughly around the same time. And this, of course, delves into the idea of the collective consciousness. Now, the collective consciousness, or the idea behind it, is that the universe is all one thing. So everything inside of it is just a piece or a part of a larger being, which, of course, is the universe. And I use the term being loosely, of course. But the idea does tie into the idea or the symbolism of the black sun. Now, I've spoke of the black sun before. If you recall, I even said that the theater in Kino der Toten is called the Black Sun Theater. Now, the black sun was used as an emblem by the Vril Society, and what it symbolized was the Godhead. And the Godhead is the consciousness of the universe. So we sort of see how the idea of the collective universe and the idea of the Godhead are very similar, in the sense that what we're saying is the universe is a being or an entity of some sort, and it has this consciousness that connects everything in it together. So the idea behind the swastika is that the collective consciousness thought of this image. So we see the image appear all over the world at roughly the same time, because what thought of it wasn't the people who drew the images, but instead that sort of collective consciousness, the sort of Godhead or the consciousness of the universe thought of it, and therefore all the other pieces, all the pieces of the universe were able to think of it or understand it all at the same time. Another idea behind where the swastika came from, or the fact that the swastika appeared from all places seemingly at the exact same time, is that it was an image that appeared in a comet. A comet that appeared a long, long time ago and flew so close to the Earth, and its spin was so slow that even by the naked eye we could actually see the gas jets being expelled from the rock as it hurtled through space. And because it was going slow enough but it was still spinning, the two jets that are shooting from the rock, the jets would actually get bent as it would spin. So the image that we would see if we were to look up at this comet as it spun through the sky would appear to look almost identical to that of the swastika image. And so all of the societies that looked up at the sky at the same time and saw this comet hurtling through the sky would see the image of this swastika. Okay, so now you're wondering, what the hell does all this craziness have to do with us and our storyline? Well, if we fast forward to 1939, Hitler and the Vril Society were sending out expeditions all over the world. They sent people up to the Arctic Circle, over into places in Russia, as well as, at this particular time, they sent an expedition to search for the ancient Aryan race, the Atlanteans, at one of the gates that leads into Agartha. And that gate, of course, was hidden in the Himalayas, and yes, I am, of course, talking about Shangri, or Shambhala. So they sent these guys there searching for what else but this temple. And it appears to look like they found it. So Richtofen and his group came here and set up camp here at the temple. And we know Richtofen was here for several reasons. One, obviously, of course, is his nameplate on the desk that's behind the wall of the Pack-a-Punch machine, which, of course, we discover while we're doing the Easter egg. The other big reason is because if we listen to the radios during Call of the Dead, we hear him talking about the spleen that fell out of the Mexican, and at the end of the recording, a monkey steals it, just like the monkey steals the drops in this game, in Shangri-La. And of course, he yells at the monkey in almost the same exact way he yells at the monkey here in Shangri-La. So we know that he was here when he was making those recordings. So he was doing his research on the three victims, Nikolai, Takio, and the Mexican here. And then, of course, they brought Dempsey here after he was captured at vril. So this is where all of Richtofen's studies were going on. All of the radio messages we heard in Call of the Dead were made here at this lab, at this location. Now, the really interesting thing about this temple is obviously it was built before Richtofen or any of them got here. So it seems like whoever built it built in the sort of time travel device or time travel mechanism, because we're not touching anything that seems to be new technology. We're pushing these giant stone buttons. So whoever created the time travel was the ones who built this temple, and they built it, who knows, probably eons ago. Now it seems like the way it works is that you get sent back in time to the last solar eclipse that occurs here, and my guess is that every time there's a solar eclipse here over Agartha, there's also a giant meteor that falls to Earth. Now meteors that are falling to Earth, well, they look a lot like comets as they're falling through the sky. And like I said before, it's the comet that shows the image of the swastika. So whoever built this was building this for the meteorite. They built this temple specifically for the meteorite, and that's why there's the time machine, in order for anyone to be able to travel to the point in which there's the solar eclipse, and therefore the comet/meteorite falling to Earth. The other reason why I believe this to be true too is because of the swastikas that we see here at this location. And before you go, wait a minute, I didn't see any swastikas. Well, of course you did. On the giant round circular doors that lead into the tunnels on either side of the map, the 4 dragon heads, look at it closely, because those aren't just 4 dragon heads. That's a swastika. That's a swastika made up of 4 dragon heads. So whoever built this temple was building it in order for people to travel through time to the last total eclipse, where there would be meteorites falling from the sky to Earth. So now we know exactly why the temple was built. But when we hit those buttons and we travel to the total eclipse, I think it would be great if we could figure out exactly when it was. Because, every map I've been trying to figure out when the map happens, and I've found, vril and Nocturne Toten within like a 7-day period, and 5 in Ascension I've gotten to within a 3-day period. But I know I can do better. Now, I've seen people say that the eclipse happens in 1962, but that doesn't make any sense, because the total eclipse in 1962 was over the Pacific Ocean. Now, I did a little bit of research, and I went and I found out the last time there was a total eclipse that went over the Himalayan mountains that Shangri-La would be able to see as a total eclipse. And the last time there was a total eclipse for Shangri-La, or for where, Shangri-La is supposed to be, was back on July 17th, 1814. In fact, I can tell you that it was sometime between 6:23 and 6:30 Universal Time, somewhere within a 6-minute and 33.3 second window. That's how long the total eclipse lasted in 1814. So that's exactly when we are at. We're on the date of July 17th, 1814, during the eclipse. Now during the daytime, who knows exactly when it is. It seems like every time we use the teleporters, we always end up traveling forward in time, and there's no real rhyme or reason exactly how far or why we go so far into the future every time we do it, but every time we do seem to go into the future. So I wouldn't be surprised if we found out that the daytime of Shangri-La is sometime after 2011. Is that when I think it is? Well, honestly, I can't say when I think it is. It's just really hard to say, because there's nothing around us that can really give us an eye or a guess as to when we are. But I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that when it is the eclipse, it is definitely 100% July 17th, 1814, because that is the last eclipse in recorded history where the eclipse is visible as a total eclipse over Shangri or Shambhala or whatever you want to call it. Now, it seems to me from listening to the radios that we've got the two explorers. We've got Brock and Gary, and they were searching for Agartha, and they ended up here, which of course Shangri-La is the capital city of Agartha. And it's, just a side note, honestly, Brock is a big douchebag. Because every time we listen to a radio, it always seems like he lets Gary go ahead and die first. There's no sense of brotherhood or connection to the guy. He's like, he's just zombie fodder as far as Brock is concerned. So we got this jerk British guy, and they're out searching for Agartha, and they stumble upon this place, and they fall into the traps. And so what's happening with the radios is we're actually traveling back in time to the solar eclipse, and we can only stay there as long as the eclipse is there. And we use our time in order to open up the trap doors to allow Brock and Gary to pass through the underworkings or the catacombs underneath this whole temple in order to lead them to Richtofen's desk. Now, how Richtofen's desk got there even before 1814 is beyond me. But of course, we're at a temple where time travel is commonplace, and we've been dealing with crazy time travel and all this other weird stuff. So it doesn't really surprise me that somehow Richtofen was here at this temple even before the meteor shower, even before the eclipse. But somehow he got there. Somehow his nameplate is sitting on that desk behind the pack-a-punch machine. And we need to get, first off, we need to get the shrink ray, which was created by Dr. Maxis, and we need to use it to shrink down the giant meteor, which is filled with element 115, in order to concentrate all of that energy into a little handheld ball, some sort of channeling stone, as it's been called. And we need their help in order to do that, because we need to get them to the other side of the wall and then use their dynamite to allow them to blow it up, so that when we go back to that place in the future, we can get the orb. Now, of course, we need to get the orb, so every time we listen to the radio and they touch the orb, they actually get reset and they go back to the beginning of their time loop. So they're stuck in a time loop because of this orb of element 115. Because for whatever reason, somehow we need to have it. So anyone else that touches it sort of gets reset and gets brought back again to the beginning of the solar eclipse. So before we start talking about what we're going to do with the orb or the channeling stone of element 115, let's go back and talk about a few interesting things in this map. One, of course, the first thing I just said, Maxis created the shrink ray, and of course the name of the shrink ray is 3179 JGB 215. Now the JGB 215, nobody's really sure what that exactly means. Maybe the 215 has something to do with 115, like maybe it's like the next step, or it's like better, or like element 115 pack-a-punch becomes element 215, or who knows exactly what it is. But the 3179 is going to refer to coordinates, 31 north, 79 east, which my guess is they're saying is the coordinates for Shangri-La. And of course that's confirmed by the solar eclipse. When I looked it up, the solar eclipse, the coordinates for it are actually 30 north, 84 east. But I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, 3084 is pretty damn close to 3179. So it seems to line up pretty well. The other interesting thing about the shrink ray is that when you pack-a-punch it, it's called the fractalizer. And the fractalizer, of course, must have something to do with fractals. Now, fractals are geometric shapes that when you split them in half, create a reduced in size copy of the original. So literally the smaller shape looks almost identical to that of the original larger shape. And when you shoot the zombies, you're left with a smaller but identical size, or identical shape, but smaller size of the original subject, of the original zombie. Now where does the rest of it go? Who knows, maybe it goes into the ether with Sam, some sort of sub-dimension or parallel dimension, and then of course after a certain amount of time the two pieces are snapped back together and you get the full-sized flesh-eating abomination. Another interesting thing to talk about fractals is what's called the Koch snowflake. It's Koch in case you'll want to look up to see exactly what it looks like. But the reason why I bring this up is because it starts out with a triangle, which of course a pyramid-like shape is the symbol for the Illuminati. And then the way it works is halfway through each of the lines, a new point, a new bend is created. So that the next step from the triangle is then a six-pointed star, and then after that there's another bend in the middle of each line, and then another bend until it begins to take shape as some sort of snowflake or snowflake-like image. And of course the six-pointed star, the Star of David, a lot of times you'll see that with the swastika actually inside of it, which stands for the infinity of time and infinity of space superimposed. So I just thought that was really interesting that they started talking about fractals, because you see both the triangle for the Illuminati and the six-pointed star for the infinity of space. The other thing I thought was interesting is, again, we see more of the canisters around, and just like with the gas zombies, we now have a fire zombie and a shrieker zombie as well. So there must be some sort of connection, or Richtofen even calls them a mutation, so it must have something to do with the canisters. Possibly they put regular zombies inside, and then through some sort of tinkering around with them they can create different mutations. And the last thing I wanted to say before we got to Richtofen's plan is the singing in the caves, or the humming, or whatever it is exactly. Now, there are some myths or legends talking about the goddess Shiva and how she is singing tantras at the center of the earth or inside the earth or whatever, and they're like different choruses. And as she goes through, I think there's 4 of them. When she gets to the last one, that means that it's the coming of the apocalypse, the end of the world as we know it. And so each chorus that she sings gets louder and stronger. So it's believed that the singing in the caves, in real life, there's actually a place in Tibet, the Cave of Secrets, where you can actually hear this, and it's not exactly singing, but it's this strange sound, this resonant sound, and that's believed to be Shiva. According to some other beliefs, it's said that is actually, and this goes back almost to the collective consciousness. What it is it's the pain of the world, the sorrow of the world resonating through the earth and coming through in these caves and actually taking a voice. And this kind of links to Richtofen, because Richtofen makes comments on the voices in the caves, and as we all know, Richtofen hears voices, and we haven't really been able to explain why he's going crazy. Is it Sam? Is it something else? Like what exactly is wrong with Richtofen? And maybe these are the voices he's hearing. All of the people that have been killed by zombies or been turned into zombies, they're screaming out in pain, and we can actually all hear them in the cave, but Richtofen is hearing them all the time somehow. And it's possible that him being here for so long is why he's able to hear them even after he leaves this place, even when he's in Derice, or when he's at Kino or wherever, he's still hearing these voices. The other interesting thing I just wanted to make a note of too is like the cave in real life, the Cave of Secrets in Tibet. It's almost like a bowl shape where the hole to the cave is in the ceiling, and it's very similar to the singing bowls that Tibetan monks use, and it works along the same lines as a singing wine glass, where as you rub your finger around the edge, it's creating these vibrations that go through the crystals inside of the glass that causes this resonation of the sound. So this is possibly, some sort of realistic explanation as to where the sound from the Cave of Secrets is coming from. Because I'm sure, just like any other rocks, it's got many minerals and crystals inside of the walls of the cave. And so just the movement of the earth itself is making the crystals vibrate and causing a resonant sound inside of the cave that sounds very eerie, almost like it's like voices or something making this sound. So now let's talk real quick about Richtofen's plan. Now, We've gotten the vril generator, or the vajra, or whatever you want to call it, the vril staff. We've gotten the golden rod, which we're going to be using to channel our energy. But we need energy to come from somewhere. So here at Shangri-La, we got the meteor, and we used the shrink ray to shrink it down to the size of a handheld orb. And people have been calling it the channeling stone. Well, you call it whatever you like. In essence, what's happened is we've taken an entire tank worth of gasoline and shrunk it down into just a single drop. So even though it's just a drop, it has enough energy to power an entire car for, I don't know, whatever, 5 hours or however long your gas tank will last you. But we're dealing with element 115, not gasoline. So we have in a single orb enough element 115 to fit inside of an entire meteor. So we've got tons and tons of energy jam-packed into a small space. And this is what's going to be generating whatever it is whatever the hell we're going to be doing on the moon. So now our next step is to get to Area 51, where of course we're going to be using a teleporter or something in order to travel to the moon. And my guess is when we get to the moon, we'll be going to that giant black pyramid that you see in the gameplay videos. Because if you look at the base center of that black pyramid, there seems to be some sort of hole or circular facet that we can place the orb of element 115 into. And then who knows what happens after that, whether we're opening it up for some reason, or that's the cryogenic whatever that we're putting people into, or it has something to do with vril spaceships if we're actually going to be traveling out into space to get to Aldebaran, or who knows what. But my guess is, as far as the map moon itself is concerned, we're going to be going to that black pyramid and using the element 115 orb as our power source, being placed inside that circular hole at the base of the pyramid. That's my guess anyway. And that looks like it's going to wrap up the storyline pretty well. I hope you're as excited as me. We're less than a day away from Moon, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I got to get this thing done. I got to get it exported. So that's going to be it for me, guys. Peace out.